Welcome. The Leadership Corner is a forum where experts from the humanitarian and disaster resilience community can come together to share their experiences, their insight, and their motivations to provide life-saving assistance to vulnerable people in impacted communities. When we think about humanitarianism and the international humanitarian system, one organization stands out. That's the International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC. Our guest today is Geoff Loane, who has had a long and extensive career within the ICRC. Geoff is currently the head of mission for ICRC's operations in London. He was head of the regional delegation in the United States, where I had the opportunity to work with Geoff closely. Geoff also worked in the Middle East, in the Balkans. He spent 10 years in the Horn of Africa. Geoff was head of ICRC's emergency unit, so you can see here he has a lot to offer, and I hope that you enjoy the following interview. Thank you. Well, Geoff, thank you so much for coming on the Leadership Corner. You have had a long, distinguished career in the International Committee for the Red Cross, and now you're currently the head of mission for ICRC in London. From your perspective, what are the top two challenges that our humanitarian community faces today?
I think if I had to identify two, the two that I would pick are, one, access to people who are affected by disaster. I think the capacity of organisations and individuals to be able to reach affected communities has got to be a number one challenge, and always has been, and I think and remains what drives us. And I think that's becoming increasingly a challenge in all parts of the world, due to security, due to identification of affected communities, due to just the means to be able, the acceptance by particularly warring parties to allow humanitarian organisations present. So I think that's one. The second major challenge is that I think we all have to deal with the fact that everybody is a humanitarian nowadays. The humanitarian world is unrecognisable compared with a generation ago. Everybody is playing that role, which is fantastic news, but it does mean that we need to organise and coordinate and plan together and understand the limits, because not everybody can do the same thing in the same kinds of ways.
Well, given those issues, how do we address them head on, and who should address these issues?
Well, I think it's important that the ownership of the humanitarian environment is widened up. I think in regard to the first issue, the political stakeholders and the military authorities, particularly the non-state military actors, in other words, the weapons bearers, are the ones who in the end allow and facilitate humanitarian activities to take place under the areas they control. So I think that's key. Their acceptance of our work being neutral, being independent, being for the relief and support of civilians only is critical, and I think that recognition is paramount. When it comes to the second issue, about the sharing of roles and responsibilities, I think there we all play a role. I think the humanitarian community itself must play a lead role because it understands humanitarian intervention probably better than anybody. We know how to do it, we know how to respond, and I think we need to bring that expertise onto the table with lots of other sectors, notably the commercial sector, government sector, military sector and scientific sector, and whereas they can provide incredibly useful, valuable assets and strategies and techniques, when it comes to actually service delivery, I think we need to help guide them and support them in their work.
Given the nature of our work and the challenges, both physical as well as the mental aspects in terms of being a first responder, what motivates you? What keeps you focused, and how do you continue to work within this field?
I guess it's the human endeavour. I've always felt that it's been a privilege to be able to do this. I've always felt that I've been given been given an opportunity to make a difference for people whose lives are dramatically affected, absolutely through no fault of their own. And I always felt that, you know, that could be any one of us, and in fact it is any one of us. And my work and work that I love and enjoy has been to be able to make a difference, even if that difference is marginal and limited, and of course doesn't address the underlying problem and doesn't address all the problems, but it does make a difference. And I suppose I'd like to think that someone would do that for me, or for those I'm close to, if ever I'm a victim of that kind of unprecedented disaster.
Mm-hmm. Professionally, what's been your proudest moment?
Gosh, my proudest moment, I think one that stands out, and it's hard to pick one amongst all of them, but I think what stands out is being able to bring food into Mogadishu port at the time when the port was very heavily contested in the early 90s, 91, 92, heavily contested by militia. The city was heavily contested, and there was widespread starvation, to the extent that if you walked around Mogadishu with food, you needed to protect the food with a gun to prevent it being looted. And I think being able to negotiate with armed factions that were literally engaged in a struggle for the city to allow ships to come into a contested port and bring food to people at the time, that was my proudest moment in a way, because it was unexpected, and I didn't think we had the humanitarian arguments to convince the arms carriers and the warlords to respect the Red Cross and doing its work, and they did, and I think to their credit much more than to my credit, actually.
The flip side of that would be, what's been your lowest point professionally?
My lowest point professionally is clearly the genocide in Rwanda, and our inability to provide protection and assistance at all, more or less at all, during 100 days, which was horrific. It was horrific, and whilst we did have a presence in Rwanda during the genocide, and I think it was a remarkable but very small piece of work, we, along with the wider international community, failed dramatically to mobilise the resources or to ensure the protection of innocent people from that tragedy.
How do you take that positive and the negative and apply that in your everyday work? How do you learn from it?
I think I've learned not ever to give up, that nothing is worth giving up for. Rwanda, if we didn't succeed, we just should continue to try harder. And Somalia, when the odds were stacked against us, and the odds are often stacked, one often feels that the odds are stacked completely against you in an emergency and in a crisis, and that at one point you have, if not to throw in the towel, at least to acknowledge limits. And I think the moment we're dealing with human suffering and unnecessary human suffering, there are no limits beyond those to do with our own physical integrity and the safety of our teams and protecting our teams. And our humanitarian argument remains the most compelling negotiating tool I think that anybody can ever have, because we're using humanity to argue with other people, and regardless of the decisions they take and how they do it and what they do, we all share this common heritage of humanity, and I think there's nothing that should and can stop us in the pursuit of that ambition. And I think that's what I take as lessons and as strength and as energy for trying to improve the lot of people.
Who's one of your heroes and why?
Mother Teresa is one of my heroes. Mother Teresa is one of my heroes, and it's because, well, whilst she was an extraordinary woman and did extraordinary things, and I think was an extraordinary role model for so many people in the world, she fought on behalf of people in situations that I think most of us would consider were hopeless, if not helpless. And she never gave up fighting on behalf of restoring and maintaining the dignity of people who were terribly adversely affected. And I had the pleasure to meet her, and maybe that's why I picked her, because I met her in Ethiopia many years ago, and she came with the same simplicity and humility to the Ethiopian communist government at the time, and they told her that she would need a travel permit, and I remember everybody needed a travel permit, and she smiled and said, well, I don't think my God would ask me to take a travel permit. And she got on the plane, and nobody dared stop this kind of diminutive but tremendously powerful woman who just was never going to give up and never did give up.
Geoff, I want to thank you for coming on the Leadership Corner and for inspiring the next generation of leaders.
Thanks a lot.